Okay, next up, we are going to have Redwan Meslem and Matthias Seitz. Redwan is a product manager at ChainSafe, and Matthias is a substrate Rust team lead. And their talk is going to be on cross-chain messaging, a use case with the PINT index.
Thank you, Kwame. Okay, I'm gonna
Hey everyone.
share my screen. I think, yeah, I guess it's working. Okay. So yes, today Matthias and I, we're going to talk to you a little bit about that functionality from the Polkadot ecosystem called the cross-chain messaging. The presentation is going to be organized in two parts. First, I'm going to give you, and I'm sorry for those that have been here already today, a little overview of the Polkadot ecosystem, especially about the cross-chain messaging. And then Matthias will go a little bit deeper in some technical details and even show you a demo on how we can do that. So I think first, the Polkadot ecosystem has a lot of different jargon that is not always easy to navigate. So I think it's pretty cool to have a quick overview of what is Polkadot. The main aspect that we need to see is that there is a relay chain, and we're going to have like different parachain that are going to plug into. Polkadot is designed in itself to be like a layer 0 blockchain. And it's been created with that idea of allowing interoperability and composability. So with that in mind, then here, Polkadot, you might have heard of Polkadot with the dot. Kusama is a canary network. It's a kind of copy of Polkadot with some different rules of governance that allow faster development. And a testnet, Rococo, the one you're going to see later when Matthias is doing a demonstration. So on the Polkadot, you're first going to have the relay chain. That's going to be that central nerving system of the environment, which is going to have like the security, the governance, the proof of stake, and the on-chain updates. This is really like the core of the Polkadot. On top of that, you're going to have different parachain that are going to be created. Think about those parachain are almost like independent blockchain with their own rules, their own tokens, and they can have like very, very specific build. XCM, the cross messaging, is going to allow us to format message between the relay chain and the parachain, and also within different parachain. Here also, I want to mention a little bit about substrate. That is going to be the development framework. To use an analogy, very fetch, but think about substrate as a form of library when you're going to have like different library that you're going to be able to use. Those library would be palettes. There are going to be different functions that you can actually compose and build your blockchain with the different rules. I put it here, the Polkadot.js, because for those that are not familiar with the ecosystem, we're going to connect to that later. And it's just really like the web interface and the gateway that allows to communicate with the chain. So because what is important here to understand XCM and cross messaging is like what is unique from a parachain to another one. Here is a two example that I'm going to show you of how you would build your parachain. Here is an example with Noodle.io, but you have a set of different palettes that are going to have different functionality that you're going to then integrate to your parachain, and then you can also develop your own. So in that case here for Noodle, we're going to have like some vesting. We are going to have some like different offenses that are going to be programmed inside the parachain in the blockchain. That if you go to, for instance, Centrifuge here, they're going to have different aspects. They're going to integrate NFTs. They're going to have like some different type of election. This is really to show like the parachain are going to be very independent blockchain with their own logic. So that brings us to PINT. What is PINT? PINT stands for Polkadot Index Network Token. Easy way to put it into is think about is going to be a form of ETF for the PINT ecosystem. Right now, if you look at all the hundreds of projects and those are going to be deployed on Polkadot, if you want to invest, it's going to take you a lot of time, and maybe not all the liquidity provider or investor there, they want to put that effort and that work. PINT is going to allow to actually gather interesting project that's been selected by the community within an index and within like one token that's going to be a PINT. Now, how this interact with the XCM and how it's going to allow us to talk about this. A quick overview of really like the macro process of PINT. On the left side here, if you have some different liquidity provider, or let's say I want to put some dot into the PINT index, I'm going to insert like those dots in the PINT index, and then from there, some of those dots, they're going to be staked based on the value of the dot and some different like mechanism of calculation, which is not the theme of that presentation today. I'm going to get some PINT in reward. But what happened is also, we could imagine here, I put token 1 or token 2 because PINT is not in production yet and all the project that no one has like officially signed. But we could imagine like, for instance, mover. I have some mover and I want to stake those movers. I think maybe mover is like, I think it would be Moonbeam, but I think it's, yeah. So on the Polkadot ecosystem, so Moonbeam token, I can like kind of like provide those tokens into the PINT index and then get some PINT in return. And this is allowed because of the cross-chain messaging of the XCM. This is really a functionality that would not be possible otherwise, and we would have like to develop like way more complex engineering bridges to be able to do this. And that leads me to actually give the floor to Matthias. That's going to dive a little bit more into details of what is the XCM format and how we actually implemented this in PINT. I'm going to turn off my video and I'll let you present, Matthias.
Thanks, Redwan, for the introduction. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Matt. I'm team lead for the Rust substrate team here at ChainSafe. And I want to talk to you basically about XCM and provide some kind of short technical overview and then wrap things up with hopefully successful quick demo. So first and foremost, what's XCM? It's the Polkadot cross-chain consensus format. And it basically allows parachains to send messages between each other and communicate with other chains within the same network. And it's really built on top of these 3 pillars here, the core principles so-called. The first pillar is that you get guaranteed message delivery with XCM. So as long as the target chain produces healthy blocks, then you can be ensured that the message will be delivered. Then you have trustless delivery, which means that Polkadot shared security ensures that the message is delivered correctly. And third part is the order delivery. And this defines that messages will arrive in a well-defined order. So you can be sure that if you send one after another, then they will arrive in the same order. Okay, moving on to basically 2 kinds of XCM messages within Polkadot ecosystem. One is message passing between a parachain and a relay chain, which is called vertical message passing. If you remember this figure where you have the relay chain as this some kind of a ring and surrounded by those parachains, you can see why it is called vertical message passing. And this is used for communication directly between the relay chain and the parachain. And the other thing is horizontal message passing. And this is works through so-called channels from one parachain to another parachain. So if both chains agree to open a so-called channel, then they can send messages directly between each other and only some metadata is settled on the relay chain then. Okay. The most basic use case for XCM is probably transfer of assets, like sending some dot from the relay chain to a parachain. And this is usually called a remote transfer. There is a fantastic blog series available on the Polkadot website. It's a 3-part series covering the basics, how fees are handled, how the XCM execution environment works. It's a fantastic read, but I will try to explain how PINT utilizes XCM. And basically for 2 things. One is, as mentioned, the basic use case, like sending and receiving some assets from another location within the ecosystem. So basic use case is first and foremost sending some dot from the relay chain to the PINT parachain eventually. And this so-called remote transfer works basically in 2 steps. First, the user issues XCM transaction on the relay chain. Then those funds that are about to be sent to a parachain will be transferred in some kind of reverse account that is attached to the parachain, and then eventually if everything checks out, if the user has enough balance, then an XCM message is dispatched to the PINT parachain, at which point the parachain can be ensured that those funds are actually available. And in the next step, user then can convert those dots that are now available on the PINT parachain in exchange for index tokens. But now those dots that are held in this reserve account are basically idle, and they don't do anything besides sitting there in the account. So another use case for XCM is actually dispatching transactions on behalf of the parachain. So if you're a bit familiar with Polkadot, then you know that Polkadot uses proof of stake. And so we can utilize XCM to actually move those to actually stake those reserve balance and earn staking rewards. All right. I
think I'm gonna
so now
stop sharing now.
Works, I would like to show how a remote transfer would look like if you're going through the Polkadot UI. So let me.
Yes, demo time.
Hopefully the demo gods are kind today.
So what is gonna do, Matthias, is gonna connect to that website called polkadot.js. Exactly, there it is.
Okay, you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so if you explored Polkadot in the past and may be familiar with the Polkadot.js UI, this is your standard gateway into the ecosystem, and all those different networks like the Kusama network, Polkadot, you can connect to them using this view. So there's Polkadot available, but there's also the possibility to connect with a local node right here. And currently I'm connected with a local relay chain, a local testnet. And the relay chain is producing blocks. And if everything is working fine, then we should see that there's one parachain available with parachain ID 1. And this is our PINT parachain that is running on a different port right here. So you can see that this is the PINT development chain. And now we would like to send some dot from test account to our same account on the PINT parachain. So in order to do that, we head over to the extrinsics tab, and Redwan talked a bit about palettes, which are basically kind of modularized aggregated transactions. And there is one especially for XCM messages. And now we can configure the message, and there's a transaction that's called reserve transfer assets. And this allows us to transfer some dot from this reader chain to our account on a target chain. So there are basically 3 or 4 things we need to configure. First, we need to configure the destination. And Polkadot works with what's called multi-location, which is basically a relative identifier, and you can configure here the path that the message should take moving through the network. And we select what's called a junction, which are basically hops within the network. So since we are sending a vertical XCM, we select the parachain directly. So we only need one jump directly to the parachain. And the destination would be parachain with ID 1, which is currently the only parachain that's running. Then the second attribute is the beneficiary of this transfer. And here we would like to send those funds to our own account, but on the parachain. And the third thing is the actual asset we would like to send. And since dot are fungibles, we select here the concrete fungible variant. And let's type in some random amount. And the last thing is the fee. So we need to pay for this transaction. So let's be cautious and type in some fee that we will need to pay for when the transaction is executed. And if everything works fine, then the transaction that we are now about to sign will transfer some funds from this reader chain to our account on the destination chain, which is the parachain. And let's try signing it. Alrighty, this didn't work out as expected. I guess I try to reconnect. It's still running, so let's hope I can reconnect real quick.
When was the latest update of XCM, Matthias? Like last time they released an update?
9.12 was released, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it's still evolving rather quickly. Let me check that I don't make any mistakes when I reconfigure everything real quick. So we have the destination, we have the target account, and now let's select amount again, some weight, and try to sign it again.
Boom.
Okay, there's now in the block is dispatched successfully, and
And now, we're gonna wait on the PINT parachain to see those arrived.
Be received, but I guess I have to reconnect as well.
Is it fair to say like the Polkadot.js is a kind of the equivalent of like Truffle a little bit that we would have for like the more people like use for Ethereum, Solidity development?
So basically only the UI and not necessarily a testing framework.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to go a couple blocks back, and now I'm in the event section on the Parachain, and you can see that we received a download message, one exactly, and that we actually received the deposit. We received the balance and the currency, which is attached to the real chain currency. Yeah, so maybe we can try this again, sending it again, and then it should pop up here. Yes. So see, we received the XCM message from the Parachain that's indicated by this event, and then we received the deposit event.
Okay.
Alrighty. I guess that's all I wanted to show, and probably sure there are some questions that I hopefully can address.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a great presentation, guys. And we do have some questions. I will jump in here. The first one, how far off are we from LPs for PINT?
There is no deadline yet or current
I think
fixed dates.
I can take this one, Matthias, since it was asked yesterday a little bit to Graham. What I can tell you, there is no fixed date to know where this is going to be in action. What we can tell is the first PINT is going to piggyback on the Acala parachain first, and Acala parachain is going to go in production around the 18th of December. But I doubt that this is going to be straight up direct with PINT. So I would say in the upcoming months, but after the 18, in maybe a month or two, but then I cannot tell more if that answers the question.
Next.
If I heard correctly, PINT will not be a parachain to start. So how would one go about interacting with the projects once it goes live? Okay. I think Matthias and we can try to answer to this, but also probably going to be a completely user interface developed by, the PINT stakeholders, where people can just connect their Polkadot.js, have different tokens in their wallet, and then contribute to those tokens in the PINT ecosystem. If it's on a more technical perspective, that question, and I guess I can look at the chat if it's the case. Maybe Matthias can answer, saying how we would contribute to PINT if we're piggybacking on Acala, and what would be the technical mechanism behind that.
Yeah, I touched on it briefly that they are so-called junctions, and these are basically the hops that an XCM message takes when it eventually gets routed to the destination. And it's not necessarily limited to first parachain and then directly into the account, but you can think of going through first a pallet and then execute a transaction in this pallet. So there are ways to communicate with pellets directly, eventual smart contracts as well, and it's not limited to accounts directly. Hope this helps.
And then we have another question: how would the demo translate in real life example? I guess let's say I have like 100 dots on my wallet. So first, I'm on my browser right now. One of the most common wallets for Polkadot is going to be I think like Polkadot.js. There is also like an extension I can add. I had like put some dot in that wallet, and then I would connect to PINT. There would be probably a website where they can say, okay, this is the value of my dot today. Let's say today my dots are like $50 each. So I want to contribute for five grand. I would probably have an interface when I put like, okay, I'm going to put like 100 dot for PINT at that price. This is the amount I'm going to get. And this is where, like the whole backend mechanism would calculate like the value, how much PINT I'm going to get for the value of dot I'm contributing. I would contribute. And then those dot, they would become like more in the hold of PINT. And in the exchange, I would have some PINT token in my wallet. And then there is some other mechanism that we haven't go into details around like the governance of the PINT index and how those dots, those 100 dots, they would be also used by the PINT index as a staking. And the reward would be split between me as a liquidity and the treasury and maybe another stakeholder in the PINT index. So that would be a type of example. But this example I gave with dot would be the same with any project that actually are part of the index. Because let's say right now, PINT index, you have like, you have Akala, you have Imagine Clover, Parallel, Astar, which are like 4 projects of the Polkadot. If those 4 projects, they're part of the PINT index, every people holding tokens from those projects would be able to contribute to PINT. And then also, since we go into this, but this is more like on the business side, there is also a case from the PINT, like let's say Matthias Seitz and I, we have a brilliant idea. We're building a Parachain, and so, but we need some help also to find some financement for our auction. If the PINT governance, we submit our project to PINT governance, they say, hey guys, we would like you to support us and to integrate into your PINT index. And if we are accepted, we would come to an agreement that also would become like part of what we call a SAFT in the PINT index, which means we would get, as if our project win the Parachain auction, we would distribute a certain amount of the tokens we're going to have to the PINT index. So those are a little bit more other mechanism, but I think that gives you like an idea of what we could do. And do you want to add anything, Matthias?
I think the original question was how this demo would translate to real life example, and depends. So as with all that front end, there are levels of usability. Of course, you could do the same thing with the Polkadot.js library, like creating this transaction, then signing this with your code and then execute this, or you can configure it like this in the Polkadot.js UI, or you can bake it into your own custom front end, which is more convenient to use. But basically, you would need to configure a transaction and signing it. Yeah.
Will there be more than one PINT parachain with description of parachains held within each specific PINT? I'm not sure I understand completely. Maybe what it means here is like, would it be possible to have different index and to have some other like kind of PINT index? I would say the project is open source, so like everyone can take the code and like try to build also like their own index of like calling this, I don't know, martini, if we stay in the alcohol vibes, and having like a different governance rules and different composition of the index. I guess that would be possible. Then they will also like at a certain point require like having going through the whole process of the Parachain auction. Okay.
All right. It looks like that's it for all the questions. That was a great talk, Redwan and Matthias.